We now correct the third question, that's this one here, and the first thing I'll do is copy out the first few terms that were given, which are -1, 1, -5, -25, -65, and so on. And we're asked to find the formula for the nth term of this sequence. So the first thing we do is look into the differences between the terms of this sequence as we go from left to right. So from -1 to 1, we're adding 2. From 1 to -5, we're taking away 6, so we're adding -6. From -5 to -25, we're taking away 20, so that's -20. And from -25 to -65, we're taking away 40, so that's -40. Since these differences are never the same, we look into the second differences. Those would be, from 2 to -6, we're taking away 8, so that's -8. From -6 to -20, we're taking away 14, so that's -14. And from -20 to -40, we're taking away 20, so that's -20. We can see here that the second differences keep on changing. So we go one step further and look into the third differences. From -8 to -14, we're taking away 6, so that's -6. From -14 to -20, we're taking away 6 again, so that's -6. We can see here that the third differences are always the same. That means that we're dealing with a cubic sequence. And because we're dealing with a cubic sequence, it must have a formula that looks like un equals to an cubed plus bn squared plus cn plus d. And so our job now is to find each of the 4 coefficients a, b, c, and d. And to do that, we need the 4 equations for a cubic sequence. And I'll just add those right now. Here are our 4 equations. So, looking at the first one, 6a must equal to the third difference. Well, in this case, we've seen that the third difference is -6. So our first equation becomes 6a equals to -6. The second equation is 12a plus 2b equals to the first-second difference. Now, what we mean by the first-second difference is the first value on the row of second differences. So that would be -8. So our second equation would be 12a plus 2b equals to -8. We move on to the third equation, which is 7a plus 3b plus c equals to the difference between the first 2 terms. Well, the difference between the first 2 terms here is this value, 2. So our third equation becomes 7a plus 3b plus c equals to 2. We move on to the fourth equation, which is a plus b plus c plus d equals to the first term. And in this case, the first term is equal to -1. So our fourth equation is a plus b plus c plus d equals to -1. We now have our 4 equations, and we solve them going from top to bottom. That is, we start with 6a equals to -6 and work our way downwards until the last one. So let's go ahead and do that. The first equation, 6a equals to -6. If we divide both sides by 6, that becomes a equals to -6 over 6. And that leads us to a equals to -1. Now that we have a, we move on to the second equation. That's 12a plus 2b equals to -8. But we know that a is -1, so this turns into 12 times -1 plus 2b equals to -8. That's -12 plus 2b equals to negative 8. And now adding 12 to each side, this turns into 2b equals to negative 8 plus 12. That's 2b equals to negative 8 plus 12, which is 4. And now dividing both sides by 2, we find b equals to 2. Now that we have b, we move on to the third equation, and that was 7a plus 3b plus c equals to 2. But we know what a is and we know what b is, so that becomes 7 times negative 1 plus 3 times 2 plus c equals to 2. That's negative 7 plus 6 plus c equals to 2. And negative 7 plus 6 is negative 1. So it turns into negative 1 plus c equals to 2. And now adding 1 to both sides leads to c equals to 2 plus 1. And finally, c is equal to 3. And now that we have c, we move on to the fourth and final equation, which was a plus b plus c plus d equals to negative 1. And because we know the values of a, b, and c, this becomes negative 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus d equals to negative 1. Now negative 1 plus 2 is 1, plus 3 is 4. So we have 4 plus d equals to negative 1. And finally, subtracting 4 from each side of this equation, that's d equals to negative 1 minus 4, we find d is equal to negative 5. And now that we have all 4 coefficients, a, b, c, and d, we can state this cubic sequence's formula. That's un equals to negative 1 times n cubed, so that's negative n cubed, plus 2n squared, plus 3n minus 5. And that's it. That's this sequence's formula for the nth term.